STEM versus the humanities and arts. Is there any value to having a liberal education?
Now, here in the United States, higher education is no longer seen as an advantage. Rather, many now see those huge tuition fees outweighing the benefits. Since 2016, there has been nearly a 10% drop in students heading straight to college from high school. Author Paul Tough recently investigated this trend, and he joins Hari Srinivasan to discuss his findings.
Students and parents are turning away from higher education. Why do you say that?
Yeah, really, everyone is turning away from higher education. I mean, the main place that this first came to my attention was in public opinion polls. So starting in about 2015, there was this sharp decline in how Americans were answering polling questions about college. More recent graduates, younger people born after 1980, college graduates were not doing much better than high school graduates. And what they figure is that that has to do with debt.
Student debt and the admission cliff, both are affecting higher education.
There are two significant issues that are affecting higher education right now, specifically through the admission and enrollment offices. Number one, it is the admission cliff, and that is the impending decline. We'll be graduating our lowest high school classes by population in 2025.
As enrollments keep going down, more and more jobs demand a college degree.
Over the last 40 years, we've come to a place where the vast majority of middle-class jobs require a bachelor's degree to be considered.
Sometimes to the point of absurdity.
Even though 2/3 of administrative assistants don't have bachelor's degrees, 3/4 of the new job postings for administrative assistants say you have to have a bachelor's degree to be considered for that job. So 2/3 of the people who currently do that job can't apply for 3/4 of the new jobs in the field.
Overall, more than 60% of American workers don't have a 4-year degree. But, says Byron Auguste,
when you put a bachelor's degree screen on a job, you exclude almost 70% of African Americans, you exclude almost 80% of Latino workers, and by the way, you exclude almost 70% of rural workers of all races.
Tuition costs just keep going up.
Tuition has been growing fast at America's public universities. In-state tuition at public four-year schools increased from $3,800 in 1990 to more than $10,000. That's approaching 3 times the cost, after adjusting for inflation. And as students logged into class from home in the pandemic, few schools offered discounts.
I was actually on campus at Penn State, and I saw that I had so much to pay, and it just was overwhelming. I didn't know how to do it. I never saw a number that big.
I just went to school for a few months, found out that it was not what I wanted at all. And now I have this $40,000 extra dollars that I have to pay and nothing really to show for it.
If I wasn't paying the student debt, oh my God, I would just invest all of my money. It feels like I will have a roommate for the rest of my life because my debt is so much.
You can't point at someone and say, this person made your student debt load so much more. It's the whole system.
What about state funding?
Funding for public universities has taken a hit. States spent less on higher education in 2017 than they did in 2008 before the recession. And that means students are spending more. The tuition they're paying is a big moneymaker for colleges. 2017 was the first year ever that most state schools got more money from tuition than they did from government funding.
If you're sitting in the state legislature and you're looking for money, the university system is one of your biggest costs. So when you realize, well, we cut them 2% last year, they didn't go out of business, let's cut them another 2%. What happens is you pass the buck.
What happens when you pass the buck?
Doing tours almost every
When Robert Allen became president of Green Mountain College in 2016, he admired the picturesque campus, marveled at their carbon-neutral footprint, and then gawked at their balance sheet. The main problem was shrinking enrollment. By last year, just 427 students remained on campus. But sluggish middle-class wages mean fewer Americans can afford to pay.
Shouldn't it be easy to keep a
college in good financial health?
It would be that if anybody really paid tuition. So at Green Mountain College this past year, we didn't have one full pay student.
Really? Not one?
And so in other words, our published tuition was roughly $36,500, and the average student paid just a little over $12,000.
You think more of these closures are coming?
Absolutely. I think 25% of schools will fail in the next 2 decades.
A quarter?
A quarter, absolutely. They're going to close, they're going to merge. Some of them will declare some form of bankruptcy to reinvent themselves. It's going to be brutal across American higher education.
It is brutal already.
There is growing outrage at Marymount University in Arlington, Virginia. This morning, school leaders voted to eliminate 9 liberal arts majors due to low enrollment.
A controversial decision at Marymount University. This morning, the Board of Trustees voted unanimously to get rid of 9 liberal arts majors, such as theology, philosophy, math, art, history, and several others.
Everybody needs the humanities. Everybody needs to learn how to read, to write, to think. We're all much better off with having a diverse student body as well as a diverse faculty.
University of Nebraska at Kearney Chancellor Doug Christensen has recommended UNK cut roughly 24 faculty positions and get rid of 9 academic degrees, including geography, recreation management, and theater. These reductions will save $2.3 million, he says, as part of a plan to close the gap on a $4.3 million budget deficit at UNK.
Tears flowing as students find out that, according to Monday's announcement, no one else will study their majors at UNK, possibly ever again.
We understand that our budget is not yours, it's not ours, it is controlled by someone else, all the way up to legislation, state legislation. But I think why we're crying and why we had our protest and why we're all here is that we just hoped that you guys would fight for us.
Changes could be in store for Miami University, and some students are not happy with what they're hearing.
That's right. WLWT News 5's Todd Dykes is live in Oxford with more on why certain majors could soon become a thing of the past. Todd?
Yeah, Ashley and Christian, our degree programs and the humanities are falling out of favor with a growing number of young people here at Miami. And because of that, majors with low enrollment could morph into new offerings at some point soon, and that is upsetting to some students. Concerns about money and competition for students may change what the menu of majors looks like at Miami University.
With the cost of colleges today, parents, everyone wants you to be career ready once you graduate.
The desire for students to be career ready could lead to less of a focus on the humanities.
Special correspondent Hari Srinivasan has the story from Morgantown, West Virginia for our series Rethinking College.
On-campus protests over social issues can be a typical part of the college experience. But these West Virginia University students are protesting for a different reason. They're speaking out against the budget cuts their university has made.
What do we say to Gordon Gee?
It's part of their ongoing fight against the elimination of programs by West Virginia University President Gordon Gee. Gee says his administration has been clear about the changes. These students do not agree.
The thing about these cuts and the narrative proposed about how they are only affecting these small departments is that it is not the case, because the lack of transparency and sheer amount of cuts is decimating the trust that faculty has here.
I think that a lot of students are being forced into majors that have like a big paycheck waiting for them when they graduate because tuition has gotten so high.
What's happening at West Virginia, I think, is sort of an atom bomb.
What do you think other schools are watching about how this all plays out?
It depends on what kind of institution they are and what kind of state they're in. You know, and some is a cautionary tale and some is an opportunity. And I think you're going to see a split happen as other universities either follow in line with what Gee is doing and or repudiate it completely.
As for these students, they told us they plan to continue their fight.
Something that the student union is trying to do is build student power.
If there is power in numbers, then these students are on the right path. Since July, their group has grown to more than 400, they say, with more lining up to join.
Does it boil down to STEM versus the humanities and arts?
It's no secret that American higher education is under siege, with public confidence in the academy in rapid decline, bolstered by high-profile scandals such as Varsity Blues and red herring cases involving freedom of expression, concerns range from the belief that college campuses are bastions of liberal progressivism filled with faculty members who are brainwashing the next generation of snowflakes to melt at the slightest abrasion of their sensibilities, to the contention that higher education is too expensive, too difficult to access, and doesn't teach people 21st century skills. A false crisis narrative, one that decouples higher education from the American dream, has been fueled by politicians who've gone so far as to advocate for their state workforce needs by proposing legislation that would have funding for public colleges and universities based exclusively on job acquisition for college graduates.
Does it boil down to STEM versus the humanities and arts? Is there really any value to having a liberal education?
When we examine the effects of integration among the arts, humanities, and sciences on learning outcomes and readiness for employment in the 21st century, we found some very positive anecdotal evidence and evidence from some research as well. We found, for example, that in students in STEM disciplines, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and medical disciplines, that the inclusion of arts and humanities led to better communication skills, better problem-solving skills, and more effective critical thinking. For students in the arts and humanities, we found that inclusion of more quantitative disciplines from the STEM disciplines increased their ability to do creative things even beyond what they could already do. And specifically for medical students, we found that inclusion of the arts and humanities in integrated curricula led to more empathy, better teamwork, and better communication skills.
STEM plus the humanities and arts, one adds value to the other.
Our students are living in a time when the career that they've trained for is not likely to be the career that they're going to be following 10 years later. Most people change careers 12 or more times in their lifetime. There is a correlation between winning a Nobel Prize in science and also being a writer, an author, and an artist. The lesson I take from that is it's not enough to simply study one thing, but you need the humanities at the same time. Another thing I think about a lot too is how many great books that are in the humanities have been written by medical doctors, and how many medical doctors are also great poets or great film script writers. That combination of creativity and curiosity that the humanities trains you to really foster are the perfect combination for succeeding in a career, but also being able to bring whatever field you're in to its next level.
How do academic libraries fit in? More cuts. Academic libraries are now under the gun.
West Virginia University announced its next wave of cuts aimed at closing that $45 million budget deficit today. This round looking at academic support units outside the classroom. Of the 20 units reviewed, none was targeted for outright elimination, but several were given specific actions to take or reductions in their level of activity. That includes WVU libraries, which will need to cut about $800,000 in expenses. WVU administrators weren't ready to give a number of job cuts or cost savings during today's online campus conversation.
More cuts. Can public libraries help? Filmmakers and media companies, can they help? Yes, they can work closely with the program departments of public and academic libraries to provide the humanities and arts with more content that supports their programs.
STEM versus the humanities and arts. Is there any value to having a liberal education?